Welcome to Color Me Dead.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Color Me Dead. This is one of our awesome little mini episodes. It's our very first one, and I'm really sad because we had it recorded. I was almost done editing it, and then my power went out for a minute. And when my power went out, it somehow corrupted the file. It closed it out. I could not get it back, so it was gone. Well, this episode is supposed to come out tomorrow. The problem? Angel is already gone. She's doing things this weekend, going to the city, doing all sorts of other stuff. And when this happened, she was already in a position to where she could not come and re-record this. So tonight is just going to be me, which is kind of sad because we had originally recorded it and I thought it was pretty good. We actually both, telling this story, we both got a little teared up a couple of times. I apologize now. I can try to be funny, but it's kind of hard to be funny, one, with this case, and two, when you're talking to yourself. So we'll see how it goes. I don't know. Anyway, so this is our first ever mini episode, tiny-sode, babin-sode, something-sode. I don't know what to call it as far as what we will call them moving on in the future. Because what we want to do is we want to take mini episodes where you guys email us, tell us your stories, and they don't have to be anything in particular, you know? It can be your stories on if you survived abuse or ways of how you guys try to stay out of chalk lines. I think that one would be really fun too. Email us on your methods of staying out of chalk lines. It can be serious, it can be funny, it can be whatever. After we get a few of those, then we can compile them all together and we will read them and it will probably be hilarious. So I think that should happen. I'm going to talk for Angel right now and I'm going to say, yes, that should be a thing. So please do that. Moving on to the actual story. Tonight we're going to be covering Tanner's story. You've heard about it. Oh, shit. You have heard us talk about it a few times. And if you've been on Twitter, we've tweeted about it. Michelle, Tanner's mother, she's a listener and she's super awesome. So I ran across her story a couple of months ago and okay, so at first I didn't know if it was just an accident, a very tragic accident, but just an accident that had nothing more really within it. So I reached out to Michelle and I said, hey, we have a podcast called Color Me Dead and I want to know your story. And she opened up and she gave me a ton of information. I was able to follow through on some of her Twitter stuff and her Facebook pages and I just kind of lurked, stalking it. And the more I learned, the more questions kept popping up. And more things don't make sense. And so I think it's important because this case is it's going cold. And what we want, what our goal is, and Angel and I talked about it in our original thing that got lost into the nothingness of the internet, and I'm still really upset about that, but whatever, is what we want out of this, especially mini episodes, is we want to use our platform that we've been given because we've only been given this platform because of you guys. If we didn't have you guys, if we didn't have our listeners, it would still just be Angel and I sitting on a couch talking about murder, and that would be it. But because we have such awesome listeners, you guys are amazing. We want to tell your stories and use us for our platform. You know what I mean? Tell us whatever you need to, and if we can help in any way, that's the main goal out of this whole podcast for us, especially for me, is I just want to be able to help somebody while I'm also calling murderers and pieces of shit people cunts. That's all I want. It's a small thing because I feel like I am kind of a total butthole. So I'm trying to earn those karma points back. So anyways, that's our whole point. And if this episode could get people talking again about Tanner and actually having more people stand up and demand answers, that would be so great for so many reasons. And the biggest reason of all is because it would give closure and that peace to Tanner's family. Because right now, it's coming down to either ignoring everything that's going on or has gone on and dropping it, which is not an option, or somebody stepping forward and giving information that they have, which is my goal, or it's going to come down to Michelle and her husband, Jeff, and Tanner's sister, Jameson, having to exhume Tanner's body to get a specific test done that was never granted to them in the first place. And I don't think that it should have to come to that. I think that would be the worst thing ever to have to do. So please, anybody that's listening right now, anybody that may know information, and I'll get into where you can find and talk or whatever with that. I'm just going to say now, please step forward. Please do the right thing, because the people that are involved with this, there is no way that a day doesn't go by that you don't think of Tanner too. And you're living with that guilt every day. And that has to be eating at you. You're not living right now. And the longer you stay quiet, the worse it seems. And you are allowing people to draw their own conclusions. I know I have drawn my own conclusions so far. And I'm going to apologize now, because I'm going to try to keep my personal feelings, my anger out of it a little bit. But please also know that when I express those things, they are my opinions and my opinions only. They are not the opinions of the Barton family. If something is an opinion of the Barton family, I will be sure to tell you. Other than that, this is me talking into a microphone like I do every week. So the question is, who is Tanner Barton? Well, Tanner Barton was a young man born July 2nd of 1992 to his mother Michelle and his father Jeff in Kokomo, Indiana. This is another reason why it kind of hits home for me personally, is because Tanner is just 2 years younger than me. So I think about my life, and when I think about my life and the things that I can do, it hurts to think that he was robbed of those things. And he may have been robbed of those things because of an accident, but it may have started out as an accident, but it didn't end that way. And it still hasn't ended. And so again, like I said, I like to turn to anger, because when I start crying, then I get embarrassed, and then I feel dumb. And so I usually play off my tender emotions with either anger or humor. And so far it seems to kind of work out for me, but it's hard to do either of those things when it's just me and the microphone. Like if I have somebody next to me, then I can play it off a lot easier. But nobody's looking at me right now. So I'm sorry that I've already started crying and we're not even 10 minutes into the podcast. This is great. Okay. So like I mentioned earlier, Tanner had a sister and her name is Jameson, which I hold very dearly because I have a child with that same name. Tanner loves sushi, and I can relate because I love sushi. It's my favorite thing. And he was also an excellent bowler. And he had bowled 300 games, which is a perfect game, before he turned 18, after just doing it for a very short amount of time. So he was a natural at it, which we've talked about before or on our other episodes. Neither Angel nor myself are good bowlers. So he had a natural ability, and that's really cool to me. And Tanner was a 19-year-old freshman, and he was attending Marian University on a football scholarship. So that means not only was he good at everything, but he was also academically there. And that proved furthermore because he was at Marian University studying physical therapy. And he had actually made the dean's list in the first semester and was on track to accomplish that again in the second semester. And that says a lot. He was very smart and he was very talented. And he was also a very kind and loving person. He never knew a stranger. And everybody loved him. And Angela and I talked about it. Like, it seems like Tanner would have been the kid that if you had injured yourself, he would be that kid that would come over and mow your lawn and help take care of, those little things. Everybody loved him. Like, he was that kid. He was that big, tall, giant teddy bear that everybody thinks of when you think of somebody in high school. Everybody knows who that kid is. That was Tanner. He's easy to be able to picture in your mind. So now that you kind of have a little bit of knowledge behind him, you can kind of see him a little bit in your head. I now want to move on into the series of how everything happened the night he passed away. So on April 21st, 2012, Tanner came home from college and he was taking a break from writing his term paper. And that night he had plans to go to Purdue University with his girlfriend, Micah Hoover. And at 5 p.m., Michelle and Jeff Barton waved to their son, saying goodbye to him, give him a hug, say goodbye, have fun, as every parent does. And little did they know that that was the last time that they were going to see their boy. After Tanner left, they decided not to go to the university that night, and instead they went to a movie with their friend Adam Hagee. And the movie went from like 5 to 8:20. Well, earlier in the night, his other friends, Marcus and Michaela Salazar, had called and said, "Hey, do you want to come over tonight?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll call you later, once I know what I'm doing." So after the movie got out, Tanner called Marcus and said, "Hey, can I still come over?" Marcus said, "Yeah, sure, of course." And so around 9 p.m. is when Tanner ends up showing up over at Marcus's house. And we know that that was the time that Tanner arrived at the house. This is due to all of the different police statements that were made later. This is the one time where pretty much all of the police statements made by everybody is consistent on the timeline. So we know that Tanner was there at 9 p.m. We also know through the different statements that Jeff, Carol, their daughter Kristen, and their last name is Linskug. And I say it weird because I don't know how to say it really. And we were talking about it in the other episode, and we were saying that Linskug sounds like a bad scab or just something. It just sounds like a booger. I don't know, something. A Linskug. Anyways, so Jeff and Carol are the parents. They have the daughter Kirsten. And then there was also Marcus and Michaela Salazar, who was Carol Linskug's children, obviously from a separate marriage, I'm going to assume. That was my bad because I didn't ask Michelle, but honestly, I didn't find it as important as everything else, so I apologize. So besides Jeff, Carol, Kirsten, Marcus, and Michaela, a man, Dr. Todd Cooney, was also at the house. And Todd Cooney he's a vet doctor, and I believe Carol works for Todd, and so that's how they know, and they all kind of hang out. And it is also to be believed that throughout the night there was other children at the house. And I shouldn't say children. There was also young adults, underage kids at the house that night. And we know that because after everything that happens, numerous parents lawyer up their children. So it gets a little foggy when it comes to how many people were actually there. Now, another little side note that I didn't say immediately was Dr. Todd Cooney, the vet, and Carol were having an affair. And Jeff was aware of it. So they were having an affair at the time. Jeff knew. And now Dr. Todd Cooney and Carol Linskug are married. So that's just a little side note. Moving on. After midnight, it is said that is when Dr. Todd Cooney left the house. And when he left, the kids packed up for Dan's Donuts. And according to witness statements, Marcus, Tanner, Michaela, and one of her friends were there at the donut shop. And it was reported that Marcus was pretty drunk. You got an underage kid who's drunk. They need some donuts, so obviously one of the kids who was sober was the one that was driving. Now, Daniela Schrock, who is a friend of Michaela, had stated to Tanner's mom that Michaela and Tanner had called her asking her to go get donuts with them, and she said that she had declined. However, in Michaela's statements that she made to the detective, she had said that her friend Daniela was asleep and they just had drove past her house after they went to Dan's Donuts. So we know that they arrive at Dan's somewhere around 1 a.m. They stayed for 10-15 minutes as they got their order and everything like that, and then they left. And then they drove past Daniela's house, and then they also drove out past the Barton's house. From the Linskug's house to the Barton home is about a 25-minute one-way commute. And then that they had arrived back at the Linskug's home sometime before 1:57 a.m., which is an impossible timeline given the time that they were at Dan's Donuts versus all the time that they said that they were driving around and when they got back, because we also know that there was a picture of Tanner taken at 1:57 of him at the bottom step of the basement as he was coming up the stairs. So this is where the timelines of when people are giving starts to get a little cloudy. After that, Tanner received a phone call from his girlfriend, Micah. I always want to say Mika, and I don't know why. So either one, I don't know, and I apologize if I'm messing that up. She had called him around 2:05 a.m. and their conversation was short because it ended around 2:07. I'm assuming that she was calling to say goodnight, that she was going to bed. They had their little goodnight talk, and then he was off the phone. And Mika had said to Tanner's mom that he was completely sober at this point and that she heard all sorts of noise in the background. But, you know, you get a bunch of college-age kids together, things are going to get a little crazy, I'm sure. We've all been there. My house is insane 24/7, and I just have 3 crazy children. So sometime after he got off the phone call with his girlfriend, that is when Tanner started to drink. Then it is stated that around 3 a.m., Tanner suddenly collapses. And Michaela had said that she checked Tanner's pulse and then she went to lay down on the couch and she never contacted 911 or bothered to get an adult. Now, if you have one of your friends who all of a sudden collapses, and you feel the need to check their pulse, wouldn't you feel the need to say something to somebody? That just seems weird to me. And maybe, you know, maybe she didn't know for sure. And so she was just like, oh, I'll make sure that he still has a pulse, so he's still alive. So maybe he's just blackout drunk and tired and whatever. I'm not going to worry about it. I will give that, but it still seems weird. After everything, Jeff Linskog had told Detective Ernie Sheary, who was the first person originally signed to the case, that him and Carol were in bed until 8 or 8:30 a.m. Now, Carol stated that she had left to go tan and get donuts, which is weird. More donuts. Apparently, these donuts are delicious. I have no idea. And Jeff stated that it was around that time is when he started to get up so he could go and do his chores. Now, he said that when he was upstairs, he heard the dogs barking. The dogs barking at the gate, which was on the bottom of the step. However, everybody else, and according to pictures, different things of that nature, if I remember, the steps or the gate was at the top of the steps, not at the bottom. So I don't know if just in nerves he just accidentally said the wrong thing or what that really means. So when Jeff went to go downstairs to get the dogs, that's when he saw Tanner and he was in a weird position on the floor near the bottom of the steps. He then decided to grab his work phone and take a picture of Tanner and email it to Carol. Now, remind you, Carol's out getting donuts and tanning. Why would you take a picture of a boy in an odd position and email that to your wife? Why would you not get down and reposition him and check his pulse and call 911? Just doesn't make any sense. Anyways, he emails that to Carol, and then Tanner was moved out of the odd position he was in. And then Jeff just went about his morning when suddenly around 9 a.m. Michaela came running up the stairs, screaming her head that something was wrong with Tanner and that she thought that he had broke his nose. So Marcus, the brother, overheard everything and he called 911, and then they had called Carol. Now this is all coming from Jeff's mouth. This is what he's saying had happened. And Michaela said that she had told her father that Tanner fell up the stairs, which is the reason he broke his nose. She told Detective Sheary that Tanner had fell down the stairs from the top step. She told everybody else, apparently, through rumors, that Tanner fell down and broke his neck. So what's weird is none of those statements make sense at all. Because, according to crime scene photos, it showed that Tanner had been bleeding quite a bit. Enough to the point that they had put a towel underneath Tanner's head before calling 911 or worrying about it. It's kind of rumored, or they think maybe they put the towel under his head when they moved him or something. However, there was a smear of blood on his hand. Like you try to wipe it away. So, you know, when you get a bloody nose and you wipe your hand and it's on the back part of your finger. So that would tell me that he started bleeding before he just fell down and collapsed. Maybe he got lightheaded and he got a bloody nose and he wiped his nose and then he collapsed. That seems more probable. But either way, somehow, somebody felt the need to check his pulse and to put a towel underneath his head, but not call 911. So the thing that makes this whole whole he broke his nose or he broke his neck or he fell down the stairs is that it completely goes against anything that the coroner had reported, because the coroner reports that there was zero sign of trauma. So that means no broken nose, not a broken neck, or bruising that would point to a fall of any kind. And his autopsy and his toxicology reports showed that Tanner had been drinking, but he only had a blood alcohol content of 0.06, so he wasn't even legally drunk. He also had some THC in his system, but nobody dies from weed. So there's nothing in his system that they know from the toxicology report that they had done that would indicate as to why he would have just collapsed, right? So seems kind of fucking weird. Both the coroner and the pathologist at the time, they seemed baffled in their reports. Like the coroner Jay Price had said, and I quote, "This is a very complicated case with many unanswered questions." And they ruled Tanner's cause of death by positional asphyxiation because Tanner's body was positioned in a way that had cut off his air supply. Now, pathologist Dr. Bruce Hughes had said, and I quote, "No atomic findings are detected at the time of autopsy to explain a sudden collapse and the demise. Toxicology studies are not helpful in pinpointing the exact cause of death." So that means with the toxicology report that they did, it still doesn't explain how a 19-year-old boy who is healthy in every other way suddenly collapses and was unable to move his neck and it cut off his air supply. So they ruled the manner of death as natural. No, there's no way that this is natural. There's zero way that this is a natural death. And you would think, because the type of autopsy that they performed is the type that they would do if somebody passes away in a care center. Not to say that if somebody passes away in a care center, they get less care, but if you're in a care center, people know that they are going to pass away. So you can do a standard autopsy to find, the cause of death. Now, if a 19-year-old kid who is healthy drops dead, you should, especially if you're saying stuff that there's a complicated case that has unanswered questions, the toxicology report that they did hasn't done, enough to pinpoint it, you would think that you would rule it as suspicious, not natural, and that you would have tested more things, looked a little bit further, anything like that. And that is not the case in this at all. Also, the time of death was called at the scene when the responders arrived at 9:34, but it was never said via autopsy the actual time that he had passed away. Now, I know personally from my own story is after my dad had passed away and we had called 911 and responders had shown up and they had tried to revive him and they couldn't, they called time of death at the time that they were there. However, according to autopsy reports, he had actually died an hour or so before we had even gotten home. So there should be two different reports. They should know exactly from the autopsy report the exact time of death. This was 2012. It's not 1794 and they don't have that kind of technology. Fucking bullshit. Anyways, so moving on to a couple more statements. When Dr. Todd Cooney was questioned, he had stated that Carol called him at 8:30 saying that Tanner had died and they had called 911. Now, Jeff was sending pictures to Carol around 8:30 a.m. according to Jeff. And so Todd also says that he had called his own son, Tommy Cooney, who happened to be Tanner's best friend. And he called to tell him that Tanner had passed away and that he also needed to get Michelle or Jeff's phone number so he could call them. And this is when Tommy said no, that he wanted to be the one to call Michelle and Jeff because he viewed them as second parents, and Michelle and Jeff viewed Tommy as another child. Naturally, you would do that. If it's your child's best friend, you kind of naturally just take them in. But the Bartons received a phone call at 9:02 a.m. saying there was an accident and Tanner has died. Those are just earth-shattering things that you could hear. That's definitely the worst phone call I could ever think of receiving. So they go through a slew of emotions, and how I can picture it is when you hear those kind of words, one, you don't really believe it, but everything feels like it's going so slow yet so fast at the same time. And that may not be the case with them. That's just how I'm assuming it would be for me. So after they get off the phone, They ended up calling a couple of family members, and they were also trying to call someone to find out exactly where the Lindskogs lived so they could go over there. And they had also called their neighbor, who was a deputy, and they called him around 9:43 asking to find out what was going on. If this was true, what is it? Because there's always that hope of maybe it's not real. And they load up and they're heading towards the Lindskogs' house after they finally got the address when they were called by the neighbor who had confirmed their worst nightmare. So they arrive over at the Lindskogs' house, and by the time they get there, because it's a 25-minute commute, crime scene tape had already been put up, and everyone who was in the home was lined up, but they were 10 feet apart from each other, with a deputy watching them, because it was said by Shiri that he knew they had already formulated a story, and they didn't want any further communication between them while they're trying to find out what happened. Now, due to everything, Tanner was not removed from the home until about 2 p.m. that afternoon. And when it came time for everybody to go to the police station, each person that was in the home at the time had to be taken in a different squad car. That way they could keep that separation so there wasn't any chance for them to start talking. So then later, Carol had stated to Tanner's aunt that she was at the tanning bed at 7 a.m., which is different from what was said earlier. That was 8 a.m. And then Dr. Todd Cooney had said, Carol called him at 7:30 to discuss one of her dogs, where he had said earlier that she had called at 8:30 to tell him about Tanner. And then, to make it even worse, Carol says to Detective Shiri that she was home in bed until 8 a.m. And Jeff went along with that, saying, yeah, we were in bed until 8 or 8:30 a.m. However, Todd and Carol arrived at the house together at 9:40 a.m. So I'm guessing they were shacking up and they weren't there. I have no idea. They had said that they had called 911 around 8:30 a.m. They had called Tanner's parents at 9:02, which they did. However, 911 was not called until 9:24 a.m. So almost an hour later. Why? Because to me and to a lot of people, you would need that extra hour to make your phone calls, to come up with a story, to hide any sort of evidence that may point towards anything. That's my guess. Because they were also told by the Howard County prosecutor, Mark McCain, that Dr. Todd Cooney had lawyered up that morning, and that within that morning, several parents had lawyered up their kids. Now, why would a vet who was not at the house at all feel the need to lawyer up immediately? Why would kids have to lawyer up immediately? If it was an accident, you would just say it was an accident and there wouldn't be a need for lawyers or anything like that. And it's just very strange that a doctor who was not there and had fuck all of nothing to do with the situation, or so he's trying to say. Why the fuck would you need a lawyer? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. And like we had said, I'm so used to that. Like I had said earlier, Tanner's blood alcohol content was only 0.06. And Tanner, as you could see from the pictures that we had put up for the cover photo, he was a decent sized kid. I mean, he was 6'3", he was 370 pounds. He was definitely not intoxicated enough to not be able to move if his airway was shut off. So Detective Shiri and the coroner Jay Price at this time said that Tanner's death is highly suspicious. So why would you say it's highly suspicious if you're also going to view it as natural causes when there's nothing that points to how it could be natural? I don't know. Just seems weird. 2 days later, well, I guess technically the next day, because Tanner was removed from the home, everything had happened that way as far as 911 calls on August 22nd. So the next day, on August 23rd, the Barton sat down with the coroner, the detective, and the medical examiner, and they all three at the time were in agreement that in all of their years they've never ever seen a perfectly healthy kid die for no reason. So this is the next day. You have everybody saying, no, this is suspicious. No, this is not what we normally see. We've never seen this. A couple months go by, and in June of 2012, Michelle ended up being contacted because throughout the time, Michelle is, of course, trying to find answers, trying to see what really happened. And in her quest to find out those answers, she was contacted by somebody, and I can't disclose who that person is because Michelle was asking a lot of questions about Dr. Todd Cooney, and this person stepped forward and said, let me shine a little light on who Dr. Cooney is. And Michelle had only known him before as his son's best friend's dad, and he was never really fully around. Michelle had only met him once when they were at Tommy and Tanner's high school graduation open house, so she knew nothing really of him. However, this person had told her that Dr. Todd Cooney had lost his license for 7 years due to his addiction to ketamine. We all know what ketamine is, and that his license had just been reinstated a couple months before Tanner had passed away, and that Dr. Cooney had been in a few rehabs, and this person had also said that Dr. Cooney was an angry and evil person, and many people were scared of him. This was also backed up by a few kids who also stepped forward and talked to Michelle as well. So it's also at this time that Michelle finds out that this person had also been a witness to underage kids being allowed to drink at the Linskoogs and marijuana being smoked by both the adults and the kids. And Detective Sherry had said, yeah, that place is known as a party house. And Tanner had only been hanging out with Marcus for like a year and a half. And I'm sure he didn't indulge that information to his parents because his parents didn't know that underage drinking was being allowed over there. Because duh. Naturally, you're not going to tell your parents that. I can't tell you how many times I was hanging out at places I shouldn't be, and I never told my mom. Anyways, so after speaking with this person, Michelle contacted Detective Sherry and the coroner, Jay Price, and she asked them, can you please perform another toxicology test specifically looking for ketamine? Because when you're detecting ketamine, it takes a special test and it doesn't show up on your basic toxicology screenings. Now, remind you, this is a couple months later. By this point, both the detective and the coroner refused. So you went from, this is suspicious, this doesn't make sense, to, nope, not going to do it, don't know what to tell you. Michelle goes on and she begged them for 2 fucking years, and they continued to refuse. Why? Why the fuck would you refuse to do a simple fucking screening? My speculation, and I could be wrong, but it looks like you were paid off. So good luck with your soul. The coroner had also told Michelle that there was evidence in Tanner's lungs which was indicative of an overdose. And so when she explained Dr. Cooney's past and she asked him what he thought, he said, well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this one out. But yeah, you still refuse? Like you think and you're openly admitting, yeah, that would make sense. Yeah, ketamine overdose. That seems like a legit thing. But nah, we don't want to test for that. That just seems weird. So June of 2013, so the next year, the Bartons leave and they end up moving from Indiana, and now they live in Texas, where they still live today. So I really hope that you're okay out there, and I hope everybody out there in Texas is all right. Shit's getting crazy over there. It has been crazy, and we hope that everybody stays safe, and we want to be able to help out in any way that we can. So I'm trying to look into specific organizations and things to which I can personally donate to, because I have found out that relief funds don't include things like tampons and diapers, and so that's probably where I'm going to put my money, is to help out women and little babies. Anyways, sorry, my own squirrel hunt. I go on them by myself. So they had moved to Texas, and they still nothing had been investigated by this point. And Tanner's mother, Michelle, had contacted the prosecutor, Mark McCain, in April of 2014. So 2 years after her son passes away, she gets with the prosecutor and she says, can you please review Tanner's case again? And he did. And he turned it back over to the sheriff's department and he said, hey guys, there is something there and they need to reinvestigate Tanner's death. And so they decided to put a fresh new investigator on it, or detective, and his name is Captain Greg Hargrove. Now, Captain Greg Hargrove was put on the case in April of 2014. However, he never contacted the family at all. It took her calling the detective on her son's birthday 2 years after he had passed, so July 2nd, 2014. And she said, that she had told the detective that during their initial conversation that Detective Sherry had dropped the ball on Tanner's case. And Hargrove said, nah, he didn't drop it. He just had a big case going on at the time of Tanner's death, which my curiosity is, well, then what was the case? What's really sad is they had that conversation July 2nd of 2014. It is now September of 2017. And Captain Greg Hargrove has still never moved forward with this investigation. It's been on his desk for 3 years, collecting dust. And so naturally for Tanner's family, they feel like they're spinning around on the same simple basic facts. And there is so much more that they could have looked over the past 5 years. Apparently this case file is crammed full of facts and leads that have never properly been looked over. And so in 2015, the family had reached out to a forensic pathologist in Texas who had told them what took Tanner's life was missed in the toxicology report, and that something had to be in his system for him not to be able to reposition himself to breathe. And ketamine is one of those things that would do that. It's very high on the list. Now, I'm not a forensic pathologist, and I could have said that, but my word means nothing. However, when you have somebody with that degree saying the same thing, you would think that it would be looked into. So in February of 2015, the Bartons turned over about 32 pages worth of questions to the prosecutor, Mark McCain, and he promised to sit down with Sheriff Rogers and get every question that they had answered. They left several messages, and to this date, now mind you, February 2015, it's September of 2017, the prosecutor, Mark McCain, has never gotten back with them. Excuse me, what? They handed you 32 questions. You've had 2 fucking years? And you still have not gotten back with them? You can't even call them back and say, fuck you. I don't want to hear you. I don't want to do this. Like, even a fuck you is better than nothing. So it's believed that obviously with knowing Cooney's past, and I'm not saying that his past should always come back to haunt him. I believe that once you get clean, or if you can stay clean, you shouldn't always have that follow you around. However, somehow, some way, he's involved, especially if he felt the need to immediately lawyer up. He's not talking, and everybody's saying that it was probably ketamine that took Tanner, because Tanner's family had been told by civil attorney Rod Schrock that a colleague of his with a good medical background stated that only 2 things could have killed Tanner. Either someone was holding him down for 2 hours or veterinarian drugs. Now, you tell me, who could physically hold down a boy who was over 6 feet tall and over 300 pounds to hold him down to make him, to make him not breathe, but there wouldn't be any sort of signs or bruising? So that's pretty much impossible. We can go ahead and scratch that out. Nobody held him down for 2 hours. So some suspicious activity that we have is in June of 2012, so a couple months after Tanner had passed away, Carolyn Skoog went on a 25-hour one-way cross-country road trip with Tommy Cooney, so Todd's son, who is also Tanner's best friend, Cassie Clausen, who is Tommy's girlfriend at the time, and her daughter Michaela. And what's suspicious is Carol never drove anywhere. If she had anywhere far to go, she would just fly. And Tommy was the only other driver. The girls didn't even have their permits yet. So you have Carol and Tommy, who are the only ones that can drive, and you're doing a 25-hour one-way drive. So of course, after that happened, especially because Jeff didn't go, Dr. Cooney didn't go, Marcus didn't go, so why was it just those kids? So rumors started flying around saying that they think Carol drove out to Nevada to sell off ketamine that Dr. Cooney had stolen from the clinic, which was also something that he had been known for doing in the past. However, this was just a rumor. I don't know exactly how big Kokomo is, but I'm assuming it doesn't matter where you are if people know who you are, and if they can sit and do rumors and speculation station, they're going to. So because because we can't substantiate that, you can kind of take that or leave that or try to draw your own conclusions to it. So another suspicious thing was in January of 2013, Jeff and Todd Cooney, so Jeff Linskog and Todd Cooney, went to the sheriff's department to try to file harassment charges against Michelle Barton because, you know, she wouldn't stop asking questions as to what fucking happened. So, you know, that's harassment, I guess. But they said that they had felt scared by a victim's mother because she was saying on her Facebook page that she wants justice for what happened to her son. And they felt harassed by some of the comments. Luckily at the time, Detective Sherry told them, well, who wouldn't want justice for someone taking their son or after their son had passed away? And he also asked, how are you seeing any of this? Because I know Michelle has you guys blocked on all social media platforms. And these two idiots said, oh, well, we have somebody following the page for us. So then he's like, oh, so you're the ones harassing Michelle. Please, there's the fucking door and go. And as they were leaving, he heard Jeff over say, well, that didn't go as planned. Well, no fucking shit, you moron. You're going to have somebody stalk a page for you, and then you're going to try to say, I feel harassed and I feel scared by the comments. Do you know how easy it is to avoid hearing those things? It's called turning off your fucking phone and walking away. I do it all the time. You only subject yourself to as much as you allow. Fucking idiot. Okay, I'm starting to get really angry, so sorry. Michelle also had sent Tanner's story to Christy Hall, who is a producer with the Dr. Phil show, and within 4 days, Christy reaches back out to Michelle asking her for more info. So Michelle sent her over all the information that she had by this point. And Christy then reached out to Dr. Cooney and asked him to appear on the show. And it just so happened that he was in the Las Vegas airport, leaving to fly home from a vet convention. And so Christy was able to jump on the ball, change Cooney's flight, and she flew him out to Hollywood. And then a couple of days later, in a couple of days, the Bartons were supposed to be flying out. However, Dr. Cooney stayed overnight, and the next morning he contacted Christy and he told her he couldn't do the show. He'd said, I've been up all night and I was scared and worried about what I was going to say, and that Carol and everyone else were mad at him for being at the show. So Christy trying to keep him there, and she says, this makes you look guilty. This is a sign of guilt. And he didn't care, and he left. And the show was supposed to be, have you ever been accused of a crime and you want to clear your name? Now, I had a small epiphany when I was talking with Angel about this when we were recording, is that he was afraid and worried about what he was going to say, and that Carol and everybody was mad at him. Part of me almost wonders if Carol and Jeff were blackmailing Dr. Cooney. And Dr. Cooney, you can feel free to email us at colormedeadpodcast@gmail.com and tell me your side of the story. I am all for both sides of the story, no matter what. If you're scared because everybody's going to be mad at you for being on the show and you're afraid of what you're going to say, why would they be mad at you? Wouldn't everybody that's being looked at would be like, fuck yeah, get on the show, clear our name. There's nothing here. We have no reason to be dragged through the mud or whatever fucking excuse that they want to come up with. No, instead, they get all mad. So my speculation is maybe Carol was the one that stole the ketamine. They decided to offer that up to the children, and because Carol, Jeff, and none of the kids are fucking vets, they have no idea on dosage. And maybe they gave Tanner a little bit too much ketamine, thinking due to his stature that he needed more. And he didn't, and he overdosed, and he died. And because of that, then they had to hide everything up. And if Dr. Cooney tries to talk, well then we'll just take you down with us. You're the one that has a past of ketamine abuse. You're the one that has done these things in the past. And even if I had stolen the stuff at the end of the day, that's your clinic. You still go down in some sort of way, and we'll make sure that we pin everything on you. That's my assumption, but I could be wrong. Doesn't take apart from the fact that I think you're a piece of shit for not fucking talking about things and some of the other shit that you do that I'm about to go into. So in February of 2015, 2 of the family members related to Tanner had a meeting with Deputy Prosecutor Gregorski and Mark McCain, and they had asked, why is nothing being done with Tanner's case? It has been a year since Detective Hargrove took over the case and 3 years since Tanner had died. And why have those 32 pages that we had given you, to have yet to be addressed. And they asked, can we hand over this case to the Indiana State Police? And McCain said, we're just going to hold on to it for now. And that he was going to personally take the 32 questions to Sheriff Rogers and get answers for every one of their questions. And like we already know, they never heard from him again. They've sent emails, they've left messages, and he doesn't respond. And he said, well, parents have lawyered up so they can't be questioned. And also, Dr. Cooney had recently been physically escorted out of the sheriff's department because he became combative when trying to file harassment charges against Michelle. So Dr. Cooney got so mad that he had to be physically escorted out of the sheriff's department. So that kind of gives you a little bit more on little Cooney. And as if we couldn't be more upset, in August of 2015, he filed an order against Michelle. And they have a page. Tanner's family has a page called tannersvoice.org, and I'll put that in the descriptions, about a march that they were going to be doing for Tanner on October 17th of 2015. And Dr. Cooney, being the fucking weirdo that he is, was following all of the family stuff online through other people. And he was saying that it was causing him stress and that Michelle was stalking him. Mind you, she has him blocked and she lives in fucking Texas. So yeah, she's the stalker. So, apparently Michelle missed a court date because they had sent this emergency protective order to her, but they sent it to the wrong address and it was returned. So they sent another one and it never showed up to Michelle's home, so she missed another date. So that's 2 dates that she misses. So now she's returned to Kokomo for the march for Tanner, and the day before, on October 16th, is when Dr. Cooney has her served papers again. And however, it didn't have a court date on it. So she's talking to Sheriff Rogers and he tells her it was it's an emergency order for stalking, but since there's no date has been set on the order, it would expire on October 26th of 2015. So she just had to avoid him and not talk to him for 10 days. So she's like, all right. The next day, they have their march for Tanner. And so on the Monday following the march, she goes to the court so she could try to get all the papers for this protective order so she can know what she's looking at. And she looks up her name. She looks up the case number that's on the piece of paper. She tries to look up everything, and she could not find a single thing. So shortly after that, she heads back home. They head home to Texas, and around October 31st is when they get a letter saying to her that she had missed her court date for October 26th. And so because she missed her court date, the order went through and it will be active for 2 years. So he got an emergency protective order for 2 years because of a technicality. You know how hard it is? There's been women who have been beaten, abused, fucking raped, and murdered trying to get a protective order and they can't get one. But this fucking piece of shit got one on a technicality because he felt afraid because he was stalking somebody else's page, but he was trying to say he was the victim. Go fuck yourself. Like, if it were me, you would have needed that protective order and I would have made sure that you know about it. And when I was served the papers, I would be like, yeah, well, this makes sense. I did say that I would put his head on a spike and I would make him suffer a lot. So you're right. I agree. Fine, I'll leave him alone. Whatever. But that's not the case. And even Michelle's attorney says there's nothing in the evidence that he was trying to present that was saying that she was being threatening in any sort of way. Yeah, Michelle may have been sad because her fucking son died. She lost a child. That is something nobody should ever have to ever go through. And the answers behind why he passed away lie within the adults in the fucking situation, and none of them will respond back. So yeah, maybe you might take a couple of drinks and maybe you might leave a couple of messages just being like, I know you know something. I don't have my son and I don't get closure and he doesn't get to rest because you are too fucking afraid to man up and say anything. Protective order. Fucking idiot. So, because he's a coward at the very least. You may be innocent of the reason why Tanner died, but you fucking know what happened. And you choose to stay silent. You choose to not clear your name. You choose to allow people to sit and speculate all day long. When are you going to get tired of that? When are you going to finally be like, all right, enough is enough? I'm innocent, these are the reasons why. Or this is what happened, it was an accident. But from how it looks like it was an accident, but everybody was too worried about saving their public name versus helping a child. So where we're kind of at with the aftermath and some other kind of sad things, and I'm going to try to get through this part without crying too, because this was actually one of the parts that Angel and I both kind of broke down, is that after Tanner died, Michelle and Jeff buried their son on their 21st wedding anniversary. And also, Tanner's little sister Jameson, she will be 24 on October 13th, which is a great day. One of my children also shares that same birthday, and this year it's going to be Friday, October 13th, so that's extra cool. Anyways, she's attending college at a university in Texas, and she's studying psychology because she wants to be a mental health counselor, which I think is really, really cool. And as you can imagine, she of course misses her brother, and she has her good days and her bad days, and she just wants to make him proud and to also seek the questions that they've all had. The Barton family is now also working with FOHVMP, which is families of homicide victims and missing persons. And two specific individuals, Robert Wells and Tara Rysek, has gone over the case with a fine-tooth comb, and they say that there's many inconsistencies and red flags scattered throughout these files. And this goes back to that whole thing that this case was never properly handled. And currently they're trying really, really hard to at least change his death from natural to undetermined, which I think it should have been undetermined to begin with. And Michelle, she's also been working with forensic specialists who can back up their claim. And she asked Detective Hargrove recently to start the progress of having the manner of Tanner's death changed. However, she is still waiting for a response. The communication between the two has pretty much been broken. He will no longer speak to them by phone, only email, and that he has even stopped responding to. So sadly, because there's a lot of things within this case that we've covered. There's a lot of weird things. You get a boy who's completely healthy, who is not drunk, who is not drunk enough, who is not stoned, who would have no reason to drop dead at 19. He fell to the floor and he was bleeding. And he was bleeding enough that you put a towel underneath his head, but you didn't bother to call 911 at any point. You didn't fucking think about that. There's also findings saying that what was found in his lungs is consistent with an overdose. So why wouldn't you look into that? You're just going to say, oh, it was positional asphyxiation. But why would you still say that was a natural death if everything that you've even said that you were finding and things that you were telling people say that it wasn't natural? You went from, no, this isn't natural, and the detectives went from, oh, no, let's figure this out, to now all of a sudden, let's be quiet, which is also weird. And I mean, Angel and I both have a love-hate relationship when it comes to cold case files. We like them only in the sense of it allows us to sit down and be like little sleuths and let us pretend that we're detectives and pretend that we're those cool people and that we can solve this case and everything like that. But really, at the end of the day, we hate them because we want closure and we're not even the ones personally involved in it. And with this case especially, I want some sort of answer because now I feel personally involved with the case. And furthermore, what makes things a little odd or extra suspicious is maybe Detective Hargrove just has he has a lot on his plate. Maybe he's dealing with too much. However, there are a few cases specifically out of Kokomo that have also gone unsolved. And I am trying right now to reach out to those people that I have found these cases about to see if I could also tell their story or if they would like me to tell their story. So I don't know. It just seems weird. There's a lot of weird things going on. There's a lot of, road trips and needing a lawyer immediately even though you weren't there and wanting to clear your name, but out of fear you decide to back out. And I just have a lot of questions. And also another note is Michelle's protective order against Mr. Todd Cooney expires October 26th of this year. So just in a short amount of time. So I wonder what kind of thing they're going to have to face after that protective order is up. Not what Dr. Todd Cooney will have to face, but what the victim's family, what Michelle and what Jeff and what Jameson, what are they going to have to face after that thing is up? Because I'm sure he's going to feel like he needs to file another one. I understand if somebody's saying, and you feel like somebody's slandering your name or whatever, but if you feel like somebody's slandering your name and that you were innocent, why don't you step forward with it? Why don't you come out? Go talk to a detective. Go do whatever. Email me. I don't care. Do something and say, this is what happened. This is what happened that night. I don't care for your excuses as to what has been going on after or how you feel people have been mean to you or whatever. I don't give a fuck about any of that. That's your problem. That's not mine. You've chose to be quiet for 5 years. You've chose to have this happen to you. You've had 5 fucking years and you've chose not to clear your name in any way. So I don't feel bad if people are drawing conclusions that you're being a piece of shit. And like I said earlier, I don't even think necessarily it was you. Maybe you're being blackmailed, but your wife and Jeff, maybe they have something to do with it. And maybe they are blackmailing you. Maybe they're bigger pieces of shit. I think you all are for not calling 911, for trying to collaborate stories, and for trying to silence children. Because at the end of the day, those kids were his friends. And at the end of the day, they were under the care of you. It was your responsibility to keep them safe. And you failed to do that. So yeah, maybe you're innocent. Maybe you should step forward. Maybe you should tell your side of the story. If you want people to quit dragging your name through the mud, then clean it up. Pull it out of the mud, dust it off, and say what really happened that day. If it was an accident, which I think that it was, still to this day, I don't think that anybody intentionally killed Tanner. I do think, however, he was neglected. Was negligent. You're also telling people that you had called 911 when reports show that you didn't call 911 an hour after when they originally said that they had found him. So why? I also want to address the kids at this point too, because you guys are now young adults. We're all around the same age. You guys are around my age. So by this point, you're out of college. Maybe you're starting your own family. Maybe you have your own kids by now. As you sit every day, because I'm sure you think about it, and I'm sure in a lot of ways you live with that. Anybody does when anybody that they know passes away, but especially if you were there. I feel bad for you in a sense because you're holding on to that guilt or knowing whatever may have happened that night. And you're living with that every single day. And if somebody was telling you that you need to be silent for it and that you were following the directions of the adults in the situation, I don't care how close you are to those adults, you are now an adult yourself. So now you have your own choices and you should not be afraid of anybody and their threats. Do what's right that speaks to your soul, that can lift that to make you not carry around that burden anymore and not worry so much about being afraid of what somebody else might or might not do. Plus, if you step forward and if you help to solve this case, it all goes away. Everybody can have closure, including the people involved. And it can be moved on and people can try to heal and grow and just put an end to it. I think Tanner deserves that the most. Tanner should be remembered right now for the memories that he served everybody, for the fun things that he did, for those funny moments, for, jokes that he may have said or how great he was and everything like that. When Tanner's name is mentioned, those should be the memories that pop up. And at least giving closure will provide that in some sort of way. So if you're afraid of anybody, you can also email me. You can email Angel and I completely anonymously. You can also call Crime Stoppers of Indiana at 317-262-8477. This goes to anybody, not even the people that may have been involved that night, but anybody who has heard anything. Sometimes those small details that you may have heard come out to be huge leads and can be the thing that can solve the case. So if you know any tiny little thing, anything that was weird, anything that you heard that kind of just seemed odd, go and mention it, because maybe that's a huge lead, and that could be the thing that could break the case and to get the answers, or at least get people and force them to talk. So other ways that our listeners can help is please go support the Bartons. If you're on Twitter or Facebook, and if you want to show your love to Tanner and your support, do something, anything. I don't care. I don't care if it's just a picture of yourself or if you want to draw something, and just put hashtag Tanner's voice on it. So I think for the next little while, we're definitely going to be putting hashtag Tanner's voice on everything, and I would super appreciate it if our listeners would do the same. I would like this to get back to Kokomo and get the people that knew Tanner in any way talking again, and maybe hold the people in the office a little bit more responsible. Having a case sit on your desk for 3 years and never touch it is unacceptable, especially when there's apparently files of things that you can be looking into. Also, go follow the Bartons. They can be found on Twitter at Tanners_voice. And I will be putting all of this in the descriptions too, so everybody can see that. On Facebook at Tanner's Voice, or that website that we talked about, tannersvoice.org. And we're also going to be keeping in touch with Michelle. So anytime we find out new information, not only does she post it on her thing, but we will also try to keep all of our listeners in the loop a little bit. Hopefully with any sort of luck, we can solve the case. And not we. I mean, this podcast is nothing more than a platform and a way to hopefully keep people talking. We obviously cannot solve the case. We are not police, and we are not people that can give statements. But to be able to be that platform to get people to start talking would be an amazing thing, not for our own personal ego, but to maybe help give that closure. Because unfortunately, the Bartons have to be re-victimized over and over and over again, just in attempts to bring closure, which they deserve. So that pretty much brings us to the end of all of this. So please show your support. Do hashtag Tanner's Voice. If you're in Indiana, if you're in the Kokomo area, try to get some conversation up again, because there is something more. There is something, and there's so many unanswered questions, and there's actually a lot of things that we could not mention on the podcast. What I was able to give is just a small fraction of information. There's so much more, and there shouldn't be any reason why this still has to continue, because if it really was an accident, it just needs to be admitted. Yes, this happened. Yes, he may have taken this, and yes, it may have gone bad, and we panicked and we didn't know what to do, and he had already passed away. So we were shit people in the sense of we tried to hide it so then it didn't destroy, businesses or lives or whatever. I mean, just admit to being a piece of shit and then it'll be fine. But to just be quiet and to act like, oh, nothing happened, it was all fine, and people are just making a big deal out of nothing, and people should shut up, and anytime somebody wants to talk about it, we should pretend that we're gonna sue them or whatever you feel that you may need to do. Just instead of worrying about all that, why don't you just clear your name? Kids that were involved, you're no longer children, you're an adult. If you have kids of your own, look into the eyes of your own kids at this point and be honest. If something happened to your child, accident or not, you know that you would never stop until that happens. So know that this isn't going to go away. And it's especially not going to go away now. Now it's everywhere. Now anybody and everybody in the world can listen to this. And I hope that they do. So this is the end of our first little mini episode, and I want to extend my deepest thanks and condolences to everybody in the Barton family for not only allowing us to tell this story and trusting us with it, but I wish I didn't have to, if that makes sense. I wish this wasn't a thing. I am so grateful that I have met them and that I know them, but I wish it didn't have to come to what it was, because I would have loved to have met Tanner too. So anyways, thank you again. Any of our other listeners who would like to have your story told in any way, like I talked about earlier, please email us at colormedeadpodcast@gmail.com. Or follow us on any of our social media platforms. There's always a message tab in any of those. On Twitter, we're Color Me Dead Pod. In Facebook, we have a Color Me Dead Podcast official page. Plus, we have the Color Me Dead group, which is where you can go and talk to everybody else. And we can kind of hang out and just be us in there and just kind of chat with everybody. And then we're also on Instagram at Color Me Dead Podcast. So, let's see. I'm not going to do any shout outs for other podcasts on this episode since it is a mini episode and I've already talked way too long, but stay tuned for our next episode. Thank you guys again. And thank you for being awesome people. And please let us tell your stories because we do care. Like, I can sit down and I can cover and we can talk about serial killers and everything like that all day long. But there are stories and personal stories that may not be as severe as, a story of Ted Bundy or whatever, but they're still important, and I find them more interesting. As always, thank you for everybody who rates and reviews. Reviews has helped us so much, and so we greatly appreciate that. And if you guys, anybody new or anybody that hasn't done a review, we still are always doing if you leave us a review on iTunes or on one of the podcast apps, and if you take a screenshot and send it to us, we would love to send you a sticker. So a small thank you that we can do because those reviews on iTunes help us out more than you know. So anyways, thank you guys again. I'm sorry Angel isn't here. And goodbye.
Ashes.